Las Vegas, September 7th, 1996. The Strip was alive with its usual neon heartbeat, tourists gambling, music drifting out of open doors, the desert air buzzing like electricity. But just after 11 p.m., beneath the glow and glamour, something else was moving through the city. Something violent, something inevitable. Tupac Shakur sat in the passenger seat of a black BMW, laughing with Suge Knight as they headed to an after-party. They had just come from the Mike Tyson fight, still riding the adrenaline from the energy inside the MGM Grand. Neither man knew that someone had been watching them, following them, waiting for the right moment. As they stopped at a red light on Flamingo Road, a white Cadillac rolled up beside them. Slow, deliberate, almost too casual. Witnesses would later say they felt something shift in the air right before it happened, like the city exhaling before a storm. The window of the Cadillac slid down, an arm extended outward, and then came the gunfire. 14 shots ripped through the night. People on the street ducked, cars swerved, chaos erupted. 6 bullets struck Tupac. The BMW lurched forward, tires screeching as Suge tried to escape the ambush. Within seconds, everything changed. Tupac, 25 years old, at the height of his power, was mortally wounded. He would die 6 days later, and the world would spend nearly 3 decades wondering, who actually killed him? And why? For years, the official answer was a shrug. Police said witnesses wouldn't cooperate, evidence was limited, and Las Vegas detectives quietly allowed the case to go cold. But the truth was never that simple. Hours before the shooting, something had happened inside the MGM Grand that set everything in motion. After the Tyson fight, Tupac and his entourage spotted Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson, an alleged member of the Southside Compton Crips, walking through the lobby. Weeks earlier, Anderson's crew had robbed a death row associate. Tupac didn't hesitate. He attacked Anderson on the spot. Security cameras captured the fight, punch after punch. A brutal beatdown carried out in public view. It was street politics crossing into the world of celebrity and rap, and it was a line you couldn't cross without consequences. Minutes later, inside the hotel, phones were ringing. People were talking, and members of the Compton Crips were already planning their retaliation. By the time Tupac and Suge got into that BMW, the wheels of revenge were already turning. The Strip shooting should have been an easy case, a high-profile attack with multiple witnesses and 2 cars full of people. But detectives made mistakes almost immediately. They didn't lock down the crime scene long enough. They failed to follow up on critical witnesses. They didn't search certain vehicles, and within days, some key players had already disappeared. Rumors spread quickly. Rival rappers, police corruption, gang retaliation, East Coast versus West Coast tensions. Everyone had an opinion. Few had the truth. Behind the scenes, investigators focused on a small group, members of the Southside Compton Crips. They believed the men responsible for the shooting were in that Cadillac: Orlando Anderson, DeAndre Smith, Terrence Brown, and Duane "Keefe D. Davis. But without cooperation, without confessions, and without pressure from higher-ups, the momentum died. One by one, suspects were killed in unrelated shootings. Evidence faded. Witnesses moved on with their lives. For years, Keefe D remained the quiet constant in the background, a man who knew exactly what happened, but kept that knowledge buried. Then, around 2009, something changed. Keefe D began talking, first in private interviews, then in documentaries, then in his own published accounts. He admitted he was in the Cadillac. He admitted the shooting was retaliation for Tupac's attack on his nephew. He admitted that the gun was passed into the back seat and that one of the men inside fired the fatal shots. At one point, He even suggested that Tupac wasn't the intended target, that Suge Knight was. For years, these confessions floated through the media like smoke. Shocking, undeniable, and yet legally untouched. It was as if no one wanted to pick them up. But detectives were watching and waiting. In 2023, 27 years after Tupac's death, Las Vegas police suddenly reopened the case. They executed a search warrant at Keefe D's home in Henderson, Nevada. They seized hard drives, memoir drafts, documentary notes, and unpublished material, all of it pointing to one truth. Keefe D had been publicly confessing to his role in the murder for years. Soon after, a grand jury was convened. Witnesses were interviewed again. Old evidence was re-examined. And the story that had been ignored for decades finally gained the momentum it deserved. On September 29, 2023, in a stunning announcement, Keefe D was indicted for murder with gang enhancement, the last living suspect from the Cadillac, the final man standing. Police declared the case solved. They said the evidence was overwhelming. They said justice had finally arrived. But many asked a different question. Was justice served, or was it simply convenient? Why were his confessions ignored when he first made them? Why did the case go cold for so long? Why did so many witnesses claim police showed little interest in solving it back then? And why, after decades of inaction, did authorities finally act now when every other suspect was dead and only one narrative remained? Even today, the truth feels complex. Part gang retaliation, part personal pride, part music industry feud, part law enforcement failure. Tupac Shakur's murder is more than a case. It is a mirror reflecting street politics, celebrity culture, and a justice system that sometimes waits too long to move. Now, nearly 30 years after the shots that changed music history, the world is closer than ever to understanding what happened that night. But the full truth, the complete truth, may still be scattered among the people who never lived long enough to tell it. In the years since Tupac's death, one truth has become impossible to ignore. He was more than a rapper, more than a celebrity. He was a voice for the unheard, a bridge between anger and hope, a mirror held up to society's toughest questions. And yet, even a man who spoke so loudly about justice could not escape injustice himself. Tupac's murder wasn't just the end of a life. It was the collision of ego, pride, retaliation, and a system that struggled to keep up with the world around it. A system that waited too long to act. A system that watched evidence fade and witnesses vanish until only one story remained. But the real message in this case isn't about the bullets or the suspects. It's about what happens when we let anger decide our actions, when we let violence answer our conflicts, when we forget that a split-second decision can destroy generations. Tupac tried to use his voice to warn the world about cycles of violence, even as he was caught in the center of one. His death is a reminder that talent doesn't make you bulletproof, fame doesn't make you untouchable, and potential doesn't guarantee tomorrow. But it also reminds us of something deeper, that the fight for truth never truly ends. Even decades later, people still demand answers, still demand accountability, still refuse to let the story fade into silence. And maybe that's Tupac's final legacy. Not the mystery of his murder, but the impact of his life. A reminder to rise above the traps that pull us down, to think before acting, to value our voices over our fists, and to choose a path that builds rather than destroys. Justice may have arrived late, but the lesson was always there. Because if Tupac's story teaches us anything, it's this. One moment of violence can steal a life, but one voice used with purpose can change the world long after the person is gone.